On today's show, a look at the playoff race and a crossover episode with my friend Matt George from Locked On Kings about the seemingly never-ending Hawks-Kings draft discussion. We'll get into all that and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1944 of Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Thursday into Friday here in early April. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. And right now, if you're a new customer, you can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. The place to go is FanDuel.com to get started. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcast. That includes Apple and Spotify, and we are also on YouTube, so please like this video as you are watching it. And today's show will be heavily a crossover episode with myself and Matt George of Locked On Kings. Always fun to talk to Matt. He's kind of hosting this one for the most part, but it's a lot of back and forth between us about, let's just say, all things Hawks Kings, and especially about the pending draft capital that the Kings owe to the Hawks that I know Hawks fans have been sweating all year long, as I have on the podcast. In the meantime, a little bit of a kind of newsy setup and also a look at the playoff race early in the podcast before you hand it over to myself and Matt. One bit of actual news that dropped on Wednesday is that the league announced the play-in schedule officially. So if the Hawks are going to end up in the 7-8 game, which I think is still the most likely scenario, but not guaranteed by any means, but the 7-8 game in the East will be on Tuesday, April 15th. So 12 days from now. If the Hawks play in the 9-10 game, which they are at least guaranteed already to be in the play-in somewhere. So they'll either be playing Tuesday the 15th or Wednesday is the 9-10 game, April 16th. And we'll see where that game is, what time, all that stuff. But that's the actual day it will be happening. Tuesday is the 7-8, and then Wednesday is the 9-10. Then if the Hawks are in the 7-8 game and lose, or if they're in the 9-10 game and win, the second play-in game would be Friday, which is Good Friday, actually, April 18th. And then if they're in that game, if they get in the playoffs as the 8 seed, they open on Sunday. So anyway, that's coming up soon, but a little bit of PSA there. And then I actually got a question, mailbag style, that will help me to unlock the rest of this segment about kind of the playoff race right now. And it comes from Kevin. This is not Kevin Chenard, although I do love Kevin Chenard, but it's not Kevin Chenard, just Kevin, listener to the podcast, who says, do the Hawks need to sweep the Magic, or do you think that they can get the 7 seed only by splitting? Interesting question, and the answer is definitely that they can, but to the point here, it's a good reminder, the Hawks do play the Kings, the Hawks do play the Magic 2 more times in their final 6 games. So 1/3 of the remaining games for the Hawks are against the Magic, and Orlando only has 5 games left. So 40% of their games are against the Hawks. So lots of showdowns there, and that's why I've been saying for a while, the most likely scenario is that 7 versus 8 comes down to those 2 games. If they split, it becomes interesting. If one team sweeps, they probably will get it. Not definitely, but probably will get the 7 seed. I do want to say this. I'm recording this podcast on Thursday midday on my lunch hour. So the Magic play tonight. If you're listening to this show on Friday, they will have already played. So keep that in mind. They're in Washington tonight. They are favored in that game for a reason. The Wizards did just beat the Kings earlier this week, but anyway, that's one that obviously is going to go in Orlando's favor, at least on paper, if that makes sense. So the Magic, their remaining 5 games are Boston, Indiana, Washington today, and then 2 with the Hawks. Whereas the Hawks have a pretty soft schedule on paper, but again, that's not a guarantee. They have the Knicks on Saturday, which is their toughest game left. Then they have Utah. It's not in order. Utah, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, and the Magic twice. So schedule-wise, a slight lean to Atlanta. But the Hawks have 1 extra game, and they're a half game behind the Magic right now. So the nuance factor here is that Orlando's 3 other games, Washington's a probable win, I would say. The other 2 are tough on paper. It's home for Boston, at Indiana. I think, unfortunately for the Hawks, Boston might not be playing their full guys in that game. Not to go down this rabbit hole too much, but it's the second night of a back-to-back for Boston with travel, and Boston is basically entirely locked into the 2 seed even right now. So if I had to guess, they will not be playing all of their guys, which is not good news for the Hawks in the battle with Orlando. But Indiana will probably be trying when they play Orlando, so that's one that the Hawks can hope for an upset, or at least a hold serve if you're the Pacers. But look, to more plainly answer the question, I do think that the Hawks can get the 7 seed by splitting with Orlando, but they also need to take care of business in their other games. So, for instance, they can lose the Knicks if they have to. That's the worst game on the schedule. The Hawks basically are in a spot, though, where they really need to beat Utah, Philadelphia, and Brooklyn, all of whom they are better than. But the Hawks just lost to the Blazers, a team that they are better than. Now, the Portland is better than the trio of Philly, Utah, and Brooklyn. But the Hawks are capable, and they have done this year, played down the competition several times. So something to keep an eye on there. The other question I got was from a lot of different people, and we'll get into this more with Matt, but I want to lay this out just as a nuts and bolts of it all. The Kings pick, just to give you the pretense here, the Kings pick, if you've been under a rock for all year long, the Kings pick only comes to Atlanta this year if it's 13, 14, 15, higher. So 13 or later in the draft. Top 12, the Kings pick keeps this year at Sacramento and then transfers to next year. That's what we'll get into later on. So plainly speaking, I have been saying for a while, the best case scenario is the Kings being in the play-in, and the highest upside scenario is the Kings being the 10 seed in the play-in. But they have been playing very poorly in recent days. They've lost 3 games in a row. Right now, as I'm talking to you on Thursday afternoon, they have a 1-game lead on Phoenix. Both teams have 6 games remaining. Sacramento's schedule is, in theory, a little bit easier than Phoenix's schedule. So that's a slight advantage to the Kings. But the Kings are not playing well. And Phoenix gets teams that don't have a ton to play for. Like they're playing OKC, they're playing Boston, which hurts, but they're not maybe pedal to the floor. So I still believe right now, if I had to guess, the Kings will end up in the play-in, and if they do, it becomes likely, not definite, but likely that the Hawks will get that pick. But we'll chronicle that a lot. In the next 12 days, 10 days, 13 days, however many days it's going to take, I'll be covering that, not as much as the Hawks, but certainly we'll be following it all the way. And as a PSA, if you are listening to this on Thursday, the rooting interests, there are 2 of them, actually 3 of them that matter on Thursday for the Hawks. One is the Wizards. You want the Wizards to beat the Magic. Not likely, but possible. You want the Grizzlies to beat the Heat, which is in Miami, and Miami's won 6 games in a row. And then also, all things equal, you rather have the Warriors beat the Lakers. Now, the Lakers stuff, I understand it's not the high priority because that pick is going to come no matter what, and the upside's limited. But you still want LA to lose because even a couple spots moving up the board would be helpful for the Hawks. So one more time quickly here. Washington over Orlando is the rooting interest. Memphis over Miami, and then Golden State over Los Angeles. And there you have it. All right. That's all I have on the intro/segment to the podcast. We'll get into my conversation with Matt George in just one moment. But first, a word from our partners on the podcast. This show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and March Madness is ongoing, and FanDuel's giving you a chance to get on the action like never before. FanDuel's America's #1 sportsbook, and right now, if you are a new customer, you get $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. That's $200 extra to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even which team's going to actually win the whole thing at the end on Monday. I have my eye on underdogs, as I always do, but beyond that, they make it easy to back everything with spreads and totals, player props, game props, future bets, live betting, same-game parlays, and so much more. And beyond college hoops, there's a lot more, of course. NBA, NHL, baseball is now in full swing. You got football, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, MMA, and so much more. And with tournament games happening pretty much, the next few days at the very least, and then beyond that, there's also something exciting to bet on at FanDuel Sportsbook, and the app is really simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly with no waiting around for your money. Again, if you are a new customer, you can also get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. One more time, $200 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com right now, get on the college hoops action, and one more time, the place to go is FanDuel.com.
The Sacramento Kings and Atlanta Hawks have been connected for years like distant relatives because of one thing, a draft pick, a first-round pick that the Sacramento Kings have owed Atlanta for years because of a Kevin Huerter trade a handful of summers ago. That draft pick still has not conveyed. It's close to conveying this summer, but now the Kings find themselves in a position where maybe they don't want it to. Matt George from Locked On Kings, Brad Rowland from Locked On Hawks. Brad, let's talk about this silly little draft pick that is strung along this trade that should have been long forgotten a while ago. I'm very curious on the Atlanta perspective to it, because for the Kings, it goes back and forth with, no, just get it over with, send the pick so it frees up the rest of your future firsts to use in other trades. And then there's the other side where the Kings are a disaster. A rebuild of some sort is in the future. Don't you want to have a draft pick this summer to get that rebuild going? So Sacramento's trying to figure out what the hell to do with this thing, or what they even want with this thing. But what about the Atlanta perspective? Are the Hawks yearning for this pick this year, or would they be willing to wait another year for it?
Well, it's, the structure of it made it interesting too. Like you said, like it's been a long time, but even the descending protections by 2 every year is like good. It's good nerd fodder for people like us. They're following this stuff really closely. I have been saying for a while, especially coming into this year, that I thought the Hawks should want to get the pick now if they could, because not that I was, incredibly low on the Kings, but I was like, look, if they get the pick, it probably is not going to be like the 27th pick from the Kings this year coming into the season. So if you get a pick, for me, it's like if you get a pick between 13 and 18, 13 and 20, like it's not the exact same value, but certainly it's pretty reasonable in value. And then once it became clear to everyone, I think I would assume, including you, that it was probably going to be a play-in or nothing scenario for the Kings the last several weeks. That's the ideal scenario for the Hawks, in my opinion. Now, you'll get split. I've talked to people around the team about this, and there's a little bit of split. But I think the consensus is basically like, hey, if that's the 13th or 14th pick, you got to be thrilled about it. And that's basically the only place it can land now and still come to Atlanta is between 13 and 16, 17. Even if the Kings get into the actual playoffs by winning a play-in game or 2, that's still the 17th pick in the draft. And that's a good scenario for Atlanta. And look, I don't know if you want to go down this rabbit hole necessarily on this podcast, but if I was the Kings, I don't cover the Kings, you do. You're better in this stuff than I am. But if I was the Kings, or Kings fans, I would not want to send the pick at all at this point. I would want to get out of the play-in now. And also, you already used the term rebuild, so I don't feel like I'm bringing it up unprompted. If I'm the Kings, I'm rebuilding and hopefully not even setting the pick next year. It's top 10 protected next year. I wouldn't mind getting another top 10 pick next year, never conveying a first-round pick at all. And on the Hawks side, that's the same thing. Like I think you and I joked about this 2 or 3 years ago. This is the Kings. I don't mean that in a negative way, but like it's so appropriate in some ways that the only time the Kings have been like legitimately good in the last 15 years was the one year the pick didn't matter.
Yeah,
the pick could not convey that year. So it was like, oh, everyone rolled their eyes in Atlanta, including me. Like, all right, finally the Kings are good, so next year they won't be good, and that's kind of what happened. I mean, it's what's happened so far, and I think obviously if you look at the projections, the Kings are still likely to, quote unquote, likely to send to be 10th in the play-in. Not a guarantee as we're talking here in early April. So that's where it's definitely varied. I know it is on your side as well. But for me, most of the year I've been saying, look, it's better for the Hawks if they just get the pick now. Just because that way you get a pick, you have a pick coming. It'll be somewhere in the teens, and that's a pretty good outcome.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, this is the way it works. One team's like disaster is another team's golden scenario, right? Like being, and Brad, you know this very well because the Hawks have dealt with this to some extent too. Being in the middle is the worst place you could possibly be. You're not bad enough to have a really, really good pick. You're not good enough to make any sort of significant realistic noise in the playoffs. And that's where the Sacramento Kings are. The fact that, like, if this pick does not convey, it's likely going to be 13 or 14. It's likely barely not going to convey, or barely going to convey that the Kings will barely avoid their protection. I mean, we're talking the worst of the worst case scenarios in Sacramento, to where the Hawks are getting the best possible pick that they can get in this situation. So if I'm thinking about it from Atlanta's perspective, I'm sitting there with my fingers crossed, watching the Kings melt down and implode like they did in Washington last night, and going, yes, good.
Well, I will say though, like there's pros and cons there, because for me, I am now, as of early April, I would be rooting for the Kings if I was the Hawks to win, because I think you want the Kings to be the 10 seed.
Well, true. Yes, true.
If I'm the Hawks, I want the Kings to be exactly the 10 seed. Is what I would want. And losing to the Wizards makes that less likely. Like that was one of the games. It's like, oh, surely they're going to beat the Wizards. And then they didn't beat the Wizards. So now it's like, I was pretty somebody actually asked me, I'm not sure if it's on the show or not, or radio or somewhere, hey, what's your confidence level in the Kings making the play-in? And this is like 2 days ago. And I was like, I'm still pretty confident. Once KD got hurt, especially, it was like, I think they're going to get in. You lose to the Wizards, and now it's like I'm way less confident than I was 2 days ago of them getting into the play-in. And if they don't make the play-in, that pick's not coming. Right. Unless there's like some crazy shenanigans on lottery night where two teams, or at least one team, I think maybe two teams have to jump in front of the Kings. Anyway, it's a night-to-night give and take right now. I know it is for you for different reasons, but I think basically all Hawks fans that I hear from are rooting for the Kings to win now so that they could get in the play-in.
Well, what's interesting too, like it's a fine line you're walking, because again, you want that pick to fall on the perfect spot, like right on the edge of not conveying, and that's why I'd say I understand. Actually, you're completely right. Like rooting for the Kings to win, but at the same time, their loss to the Hawks last night, the Wizards last night, meant that they could not, like, they're mathematically eliminated from even moving up to 8th, and somehow the Dallas Mavericks went from a broken Luka-less shambles to now like in the clear for the 9th seed, to where they will host at least the first round of the play-in. So now this is the point where it's like, oh, you almost are rooting for the Kings to just go 500 for the rest of this season. They got 6 games left, 3-3. They probably stay right at 10.
Yeah, 3-3. They get in the play-in probably at this point, given where the Suns' schedule is and KD's injury and all those things. I mean, I'll wait in. I'll ask you. True serum. Do you want the Kings to make the play-in? Do you think that's for the organization? Would you rather be out of the play-in or in the play-in?
So, and like out of the play-in for me, and it's because it doesn't really have to do with the draft pick, although the draft pick is like a branch off of my bitter little tree. Like I'm not in a position to where I don't want to see the Sacramento Kings have any opportunity to claim any sort of success from this season. Like I understand the fact the play-in gives them an opportunity to somehow win 2 one-off games and limp their way into the playoffs, and then turn around and say, we made the playoffs this year when we didn't last year. That's improvement. No, your organization's in an absolute disaster crap hole of a place again. So that's more how I feel about it. But yes, the draft pick is an extension to that, because while like, I don't think the Kings are headed towards any full-on rebuild, because they don't want to. Like, financially, they don't want to. They have no interest. Yeah. Ownership, they've been raising ticket prices for the last 3 years. They've tried to milk every penny out of the fan base with the emergence of the Beam team and everything from the last couple of years. So those prices are continuing to go up. They have no interest in dropping them and going down. So the Kings want to remain competitive, but they're also there is no quick fix. Another part of that too, Brad, is like, I don't want the pick to go to Atlanta so that it frees up all the future first round picks for the Kings to go and do something stupid with a bunch of future draft capital in order to make a swing on one more like desperate attempt at being what in the West. It just like that's keeping the pick, to me, is the safest route to the Kings doing what needs to be done. I guess that's where I'm at with the situation.
And I'm not surprised by any of that. And I think that this entire time, even the last 2 years, this is the same thing we did last year, right? We did a dance. You and I talked about this last year. Like, will they or won't they convey the pick? All they got to do is make the playoffs to keep it, all these things, or not keep it, I should say. Yeah. I do hear other opinions. Look, if you want to get super greedy and you're the Hawks, yeah, is there a scenario where you get the 10th pick next year compared to the 12th pick this year or whatever? No, sorry, the 13th pick this year versus 11th or whatever it is.
Right.
Yes, but if I'm the Hawks, like if you can get a 13th or 14th pick, then you have to be thrilled about that. And generally speaking, there are trades that are win-win trades, obviously. But this is that like all the player, like you let with it in the intro. The player stuff's already out the window. Herter's not even there anymore.
Sure.
Like it's all about just where this pick lands and who gets it. That's right. The entirety of the trade at this point. And I think Hawks fans are certainly rooting for at least the 10 seed, if not the 9 seed for the Kings.
It's crazy the difference a year makes, because I desperately wanted last year's pick to go to the Hawks. It ended up being Devin Carter. Not that I have anything to do with any issue with Devin Carter specifically, but At the time, that's where I wanted the pick to convey, so it would free up assets to try and make a move last summer. Of course,
Well, and make the playoffs too. Like that last year was actually a lot more clean because it was like playoffs, pick goes, no playoffs, pick stays. It was that clean. But now you get into the top 12 and then top 10 next year. There's a lot more gray area there. It's like, and you can't, to your point earlier, you can't declare victory as easily. Like, when you make the playoffs cleanly, it's like, all right, we're in the playoffs.
Sure.
Even though that's like not the super high bar, but it's easier to sell that when you just kind of get in there. But if you're the Kings and you're sending the 13th pick in the draft, that is not a great, even PR wise, it's like kind of like it's technically a lottery pick. Like it's not, it's a bad lottery pick, but man, that's rough.
It's disaster for sure. Now, I remember because around this time last year, I was in New Orleans. It was when the Kings were playing their second play-in game to the Pelicans. They lost to 6 freaking times last season. And I was on the court pregame, and Kings general manager Monty McNair was there. And I approached him like, hey, question for you. You don't have to answer it. I don't even know if you can. Like, is there a scenario? Is there a way where you could contact Atlanta and just go, just take the pick? Like, we remove all protections, just take the pick. Yeah. And we kind of went back and forth about how that would work. It's very convoluted. Essentially, the Kings would almost have to trade for the pick back, remove the protections, and then trade it back.
And send it back.
It's a very convoluted scenario, but
that's silly too. Like that's kind of silly. Like it should be easier than that,
right? And I came away going, Atlanta wouldn't want this. Atlanta's betting on Sacramento to be Sacramento.
Yeah, well, but also I would understand that if the pick became unprotected, then the Hawks would be like, no, we don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. But it never becomes better than top 10 protected. There's only so much upside with the chance to be the 11th pick next year versus getting the 16th pick last year. Like you probably would have just taken the bird in hand. That's what I thought even last season. And I think especially this season, it's like, man, sign me up for the 13th, 14th pick. Like that'd be great for the Hawks. So,
well, the Hawks and Kings are in somewhat similar positions to where they underperformed this year. They're both looking to, I don't want to speak for the Hawks. I know the Sacramento Kings are looking to some sort of reset. I don't know if Atlanta's going for like a hard rebuild or reset or what they're looking to do, but there's only so many players that come into the league, and this is not like a fantasy draft at the beginning of every year where you just get to redraft your team, right? Your roster is what you have. You have to exchange players. Those players have to come from somewhere, and those players have to go somewhere.
Today's just brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. Daylight savings time stuck up on us again, of course, and if you're still feeling that lost hour of sleep like I happen to be, 5-Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you actually need a little bit of a boost to power through. And whether you're staying up late to watch games like I do all the time, squeezing in a round of golf perhaps after work, or keep up with your busy day and your busy life, 5-Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you happen to need it. And you guys know this. I have to be up late at night a lot to cover games, talk about them on the podcast, etc. And 5-Hour Energy helps me keep up through the next day and really even that day as well. With longer days, I love getting outside as well for walks or runs or just being outside to take it all in. And Tropical Burst is my go-to personally for a quick boost. Whether I'm at a game or traveling, 5-Hour Energy is easy to grab and keeps me feeling refreshed. And you can head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, peach mango, and the aforementioned Tropical Burst. You can actually build your 12-pack or 24-pack as well, delivered right to your door if you want to do that instead. Or if you need one right now, grab a 5-Hour Energy shot immediately at your local grocery or convenience store. Stock up today and stay energized with 5-Hour Energy. Check it out now at 5hourenergy.com.
Brad, I have heard whispers and conversations in Sacramento of at least monitoring Trae Young. That to me feels like another one of those desperate looking for a quick fix type move for the Kings. And every time they've tried a quick fix, it's been a disaster. So I am very much out on any kind of quick fix scenario, but I do know that that's a name that at least is being monitored, and a lot of teams are doing this, not just the Kings, but the Kings are definitely paying attention to what's going on with the Trae Young status. I wanted to bring up this conversation, and we can talk about Trae, of course, too, but I wanted it to be both ways. So it's not just a Kings perspective. Like, is there anybody in Sacramento, whether it's DeRozan, probably not Levine with his contract, Sabonis, who even has a big contract himself, Keegan, anybody on this Kings roster that you think the Hawks would be paying attention to or trying to, if they're starting a soft rebuild or whatever they're trying to do, looking to that talent as, hey, that's something that we wouldn't mind adding in Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, the Hawks are kind of retooling. I mean, it's funny you mentioned they're in similar spots. As we were talking, they have the exact same record, which is kind of funny. they're 36-40. But I don't want to speak for everyone around the Hawks, but for me, it's much more of a successful season for the Hawks than anyone would say about the Kings, because the Hawks were already kind of doing the retool. Like last summer, they chose to trade DeJounte Murray in a future-facing trade. And honestly, Dyson Daniels is currently better than DeJounte Murray, which is not what I expected. Even though I loved Dyson Daniels, I love that trade at the time. I praised it. No one thought he was going to just be better immediately than DeJounte Murray, and
he's unbelievable.
So there's that, but it was already kind of a soft retool anyway. Not a full-on rebuild by any means, but they were already going young. Reece Shea, number 1 pick, Jalen Johnson, etc. They're pretty young, and they're not pushed. The chips are not pushed in for the Hawks in the way they have been for the Kings. You know what I mean?
Right.
That makes sense.
Absolutely.
There's a little bit of context there, and the Hawks are also going to exceed their over/under win total. Like, they're going to be better than people thought they were going to be coming into the year. So that's a little bit of this, but also Trey is a topic all the time, especially even beyond Atlanta. It's like, all right, what's going to happen with Trey? Because he's about to be extension eligible. And you know this very well. Like, if a star gets to extension eligibility and they don't sign an extension, people assume they're going to be traded. There's that will they or won't they point. It's coming this year, this summer. Doesn't mean it has to be that way, but it often is that way. And also, like, they are really young. And Trey's still young. He's 26 years old. He's not like he's an old player, but he's a little bit older than the rest of their core guys, right? So that's a little bit of a setup. As far as what, like, interest in the Kings guys, yeah, I would immediately cross off DeRozan just for age purposes. Like, it doesn't make sense. It's funny. There's always been a contingent in Atlanta. I am not part of this contingent of fans, and it's not crazy, that have always liked Zach LaVine like way more than I do, and like pairing him with Trae Young. And I think offensively it would be a lot of fun. Offensively, it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, stop there.
Yeah. So there's that. And in the contract, I would not want to do that, and I have not heard Hawks' interest. But I will say, the Sabonis stuff about, like, he wants to see what the organization's doing and all of that. Anyway, I don't want to trigger you on the podcast, but there have been people in my life who are close to the Hawks that have kind of wondered to me, in these very casual conversations, like, what would Sabonis look like in Atlanta? And not, by the way, not for Trey, like in this scenario alongside
with Trey, right?
With Trey,
right?
I don't know if I love it, to be honest. I've never gone down the road long enough to really think about it, like, deeply. Similar, because defensively, I don't know if it would ever be good enough, even though the Hawks do have a lot of wing defensive infrastructure that you would need to have. If you're 1-5 or Sabonis and Trey, you're going to have some defensive problems probably along the way. But he would be the one. And then, of course, Keegan Murray fits anywhere. So,
sure.
Like, you mentioned his name. I wasn't going to bring him up because I'm not sure if he's ever going to be available for anybody anyway, but I think Keegan Murray would fit anywhere. Just that kind of forward fits everywhere. So sure,
right.
Sign me up for Keegan Murray if he's available in some respects. I mean, the Trey thing's interesting. I think I've long thought if the Hawks were to trade Trey, I've wondered who that team is going to be that's going to meet their very lofty asking price. The Hawks have never tried to trade Trey. That's a very key distinction. They did listen last summer, very quietly, like, hey, what would it, and no one was even close to what they were going to need to actually do it, basically. But, like, the desperation aspect we kind of poke fun of earlier, like, if the Kings want to go nuts, like, maybe that's a team that would kind of make sense on their side of things, because that's the trouble. Like, I'm very high on Trey. For Kings fans listening to this, I'm definitely on the higher side about Trey. I think Trey's underrated nationally now. He used to be overrated, which is kind of funny, like 3 or 4 years ago, and now I think he's pretty clearly underrated. Facts of life, it is what it is. But I do wonder, like, who the team is that's going to be like, all right, we're going to give you the ransom for the guy who's getting older, is still really small, and has challenges to build around. I think he's really, really good, but maybe that's the Kings. I don't, it's a mixture. We've done this before. The Kings and Hawks don't always match up perfectly on trades. It's like, it feels like there should be something there, and there always kind of isn't. There's always a disconnect somewhere, other than the Kevin Huerter deal, famously, that actually happened. But what do you think?
Well, first off, look, the Kings already owe you 1 first-round pick. Why not just owe you 7 over the next?
Seven would probably be enough. If the Kings said, "Hey, we'll trade you everything we possibly have," the Hawks might consider doing.
We'll take it all. Yeah, but that's where I think the Trae Young situation is, like, that's where I think it's like a desperate swing, quick fix, which just the Sacramento Kings just have to avoid at this point. So I don't think it makes any sense for the Kings really to pursue it. And then, kind of like what you broke down, like, the assets that the Kings have to trade are not that desirable. Like Sabonis has a tremendous amount of value, and I'm a huge Sabonis fan. Sabonis is now a $40+ million per year player, and that contract basically gets up to $50 million by the end of it. Zach LaVine's got 2 years left on his deal at 48 and 50 million. Like nobody wanted that contract except for the Kings, apparently. And then DeRozan is financially not overpriced. Like he's in the 20 million range, but he's 36 years old, and he's going to want to go to a team there where he can just put himself in a window to try and win over the sunset years of his career. And I don't know if that makes sense for Atlanta. I don't know, it makes sense for him. So once again, it just doesn't make sense for the Kings to be a good trade partner for Atlanta in any of these scenarios. But I don't know if the Kings are a good trade partner for anybody. And that's the position that they put themselves in. And that's what's so infuriating about this whole thing. But as you were talking about Trey's situation, like it dawned on me, because the Kings went through the negotiations with a star point guard on the end of his deal, and it resulted in what it resulted in. Was there any part of you or anybody in Atlanta that looked at what happened with De'Aaron Fox this season and it spooked them? Like, oh God, we don't want that to happen. We don't want Trey to hold us ransom or in any kind of perspective, or we don't want the Hawks to get pennies on the dollar, because the Kings sent De'Aaron Fox to San Antonio, got little to nothing of value in return. Some future first rounders that your fingers crossed or anything of value. And you got one of the worst contracts in the league in Zach LaVine by including the Bulls in the deal. Like it's a bad trade for your star, your franchise player. And now here you are. I wonder if Atlanta looks at that and goes, oh God, we got to avoid that with whatever happens with Trae Young.
I think they're always, whenever a star gets moved, the conversation happens in that market. Like, how does this impact our guy? Same position too. And I think, I'm not trying to have a De'Aaron Fox versus Trae Young debate right now, but they're at least in a similar range of perception in the league, right?
Money wise too, yeah.
So you got it, yeah. I mean, there are some parallels there, and that's why I have been signaling, and it's not like a secret. The Hawks know that, everybody knows it. I'm sure as well, that this summer's a big one. It's like, okay, you either give him an extension for. I mean, the question is, do you offer him a max extension? His max is a lot of money. It's a lot of money for a lot of years. Do you offer that? Do you offer that? That's step one. Number two is, does he want to take it? And that's not a given either. Is there a middle ground below the max? Don't know the answer to that. And then, if you don't extend him, are you okay going into a season where this is his last year under team control, where he can just opt out and leave at the end of it? And is that better or worse? Like I tend to always lean to, you want to get something back if you're going to lose a guy at that level. Like, it's brutal to lose that guy like that for quote unquote nothing. If they leave him for agency, it's like, man, that didn't go well, especially when you're not a title contender. Like the Hawks are probably not going to be this coming season. Like, it's different if you're all in, you're like, all right, one last ride. We're trying to win this thing and we'll see at the end of the year. That's not where the Hawks are probably going to be next year, if I had to guess. So yeah, there are parallels for sure. And you don't want to get held over a barrel. Obviously, it's even worse in season, which was what happened with Fox, because you have there's limited time, limited suitors that can even do the trade in season. All those things that I know you dealt with for that short, actually ended up being a pretty short period of time. But,
and they didn't have to do it. He was under contract for another year. Like, you could have waited till the summer, but whatever. I digress.
I mean, big picture. If it's going to happen again, if it was something like that's going to happen, you'd rather do it in the summer, where you don't have a time clock. Every team in the league is theoretically able to make offers, and roster management stuff's easier, all that stuff. So I'm not saying it's going to happen. I still think, if I had to guess right now, Trey is going to either extend or they won't trade him. But it's definitely possible, and I think that the rude awakening, if they needed it, came last summer. Was like the ejection option of like, oh, at least we'll be able to trade Trey for 5 first-round picks is not really there, I don't think. The market for, and by the way, I think that's kind of silly. I think Trey's underrated, but I think the reality around the league is, I don't know of a team clamoring to trade like their whole draft, like KD style, for Trae Young. Like, that's not there. So there's a little bit of nuance and context, and like, there's a real negotiation, I would imagine, that's going to happen this summer.
Well, it'll be something intriguing to pay attention to. It's funny. Well, we'll wrap it up with this, Brad. 6 months ago, if you were to ask me, Matt, you can switch rosters and situations with the Hawks right now, I would have gone, hell no. 6 months later, Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I get both those things. I really do. Given where the Kings had been, and I probably would have been closer than you a year ago to like on your side to being at least considering it. Now, I do think that's not even. I'm not really a homer. I'm not like emotional the way that I probably was 15 years ago about the Hawks. But I think the Hawks are in a better place than the Kings just because they're younger, they're cheaper. They got not that Keegan Murray's not good, but like or Devin Carter, but they're not Zachary Shea. I mean, as far as Jalen Johnson's a $30 million player who's cheap and locked in long term and all those things. So, and the flexibility of it all. So I'd probably go there, but it could all change fast. We've all seen that in the league. It could all change fast. I was not trying to wish cast a Sabonis ask out on you earlier in the podcast, but I think once that kind of made the rounds that Sabonis wants to hear more from the organization, it's like, oh man, I know what that usually means. Or sometimes
Sabonis asking the same questions that De'Aaron Fox asked. Weird. It's almost like
that everybody asks, of course. Oh, wow. I have to say this too before we sign off. I haven't wait on. I don't know anything about this, but I covered Wes Wilcox in Atlanta, and Wes just jumped ship and went to college to be assistant GM. And I thought, I wonder if Wes thinks he's about to get fired, along with maybe everybody with the Kings. Does that sound? I didn't let to be. I'm sure you talked about this at the time. Did we share that opinion, or am I off base there? I haven't asked Wes. I have Wes's number. I could probably ask him. I haven't asked him questions.
Let's put it this way. I think people are jumping off the Titanic.
That's kind of what it felt like. Because I just want to see what you said.
I'm of the belief, and I was pretty darn critical of Wes because he was he very much like he was the front face of this front office. He was the lead assistant to Monty McNair here in Sacramento, but Wes handled a ton of stuff. And
that's what happened in Atlanta when he was not the number one guy in Atlanta either. It was technically Mike Budenholzer, which is funny at the time. One of those final like president head coach pairings. It was Bud in charge, but Wes was, to your point, the GM, the facing guy here.
But Brad, over the last month, you had your assistant GM abandon ship to go to the University of Utah. And you had one of your lead assistants and essentially your defensive coordinator and Luke Laux leave mid-season to go be the new head coach of Florida State. Like the writing's on the wall. Changes need to happen, and I think everybody's looking around and going, "Yeah, we're on a sinking ship that I don't think you can. There's not enough holes or glue in the world to patch these holes at this point, right? That's what I think. Wes saw the writing on the wall, and I would have, not that I ever root for people to lose their jobs, but I am very much captain, like get rid of this front office and start fresh anyway. So I would have wanted to see Wes's departure one way or another, and it makes it morally easier for me to just see him leave and go take a new job, and I could say thank you, bon voyage.
Yeah, no, that's the only connection that we had not talked about. And honestly, that's one where like I'm old and I've been covering the Hawks for a long time. Hawks fans now are like, who's Wes Wilcox? I don't know who that is, but I covered Wes, so I was curious what you thought about that.
Well,
here we are.
Here we are, man. What great. Wonderful. That sure 1 year of the Kings being in the playoffs was sure wonderful. Now let's go back to 16 more years of hell.
1 year in the playoffs when they did not owe their draft pick to the Hawks. The one time they didn't owe their draft pick to the Hawks, they made the playoffs. So
freaking league. This league is so stupid. Basketball's stupid. Locked On is stupid. Brad, have fun in Atlanta or whatever. I don't care.
I'm going to clip that and play it for our bosses. It's just this Locked On is stupid. Caption Matt George.
He listened to me completely crash out after the Kings lost to the Wizards last night. He watched the podcast and texted me this morning saying he liked it. So I think they enjoy the pain here in Sacramento. But hey, best of luck in Atlanta, Brad. Hopefully you get your draft
you're a
pick,
celebrity.
buddy.
You're a celebrity now for some of your cold opens. You know, all these. You're just a Locked On celebrity. That's all. I don't get that stuff. I'm boring. People don't like what I say.
I'm just saying.
Thank you, Matt, for doing
this. We need an alcoholic company just to sponsor Locked On. That's my goal. Is just get some alcohol so I can drink legally on stream. Appreciate you, Brad.
You too, Matt.